Okay, and we're back. I have my screen kind of in a funky shape because I have been told that apparently when I thought I had been turning my picture off down here, I have not been. Couple settings down here. We have, and I'm just going to go kind of, actually, let's do the whole bottom row while we're down here. So by default, we work in the model space. There's two kind of work environments you have in here, which is the model space, where you build your model, and then the paper space or layout space, where you actually set up what it would look like in a printable area. So a piece of paper, or sheet, or PDF output, whatever that's going to be. So we've got that as the model, and then if I click on layout here, you can see it generates a page. We will get into that later. Don't worry about that for now. It's just what it is. You can toggle between paper and model space right here, especially once you're in paper space. You can get into this area and then double click to get out. Um, but we're not necessarily going to be using that right now. This next button is the grid, and you can see I have this grid back here. You can toggle that on or off, whatever your preference might be. Snap mode I find incredibly frustrating. So if you turn this on, you can see that it's going to kind of snap to grid spaces. All right, I'm not a huge fan of this because it kind of limits what you can do. And I think that a good typing hand is better than a lot of other assists as far as that goes. Um, so yeah, I typically turn this whole snap thing off, and leave it off. Again, personal preference. So next one up is Ortho Mode, and what Ortho Mode is going to do is if I'm drawing normally, you can see I can kind of start going off in any direction right here. All right. If I turn Ortho Mode on, it's going to lock me into a polar or kind of like a or coordinate direction. Like I basically am stuck in going one axis no matter what I do. Okay, not a huge fan of that. So what I usually typically run with is this polar one, which is what I had on by default, which actually lets me go in all these different directions. If you know what the keyboard commands are, you can actually switch in between them. Oops. Oh, except I forgot what polar was. So you can switch between them on the fly as you're working. Obviously, I find it's a lot easier to just kind of snap it in the right direction and go like that. Within this, you have a couple with this drop down next to the polar tracking. You have a couple different settings you can choose. I typically tend to stay just on one of these settings here. Maybe I'll go down to 45-degree angles. I typically won't get it any lower than that because then once you get into like, well, the weird numbers, where you get kind of like it starts snapping at like way too many intervals. So I kind of like 45, and then anything below that, again, I will type the angle myself. So I typically don't do isometric drafting. I would just stay away from that one, um, especially because of how we're going to be working. I think it's too confusing to work like that. So again, I'm going to recommend not even turning that on. I've only used it like once or twice, and again, found it confusing. Some people might be your thing. Um, not going to cover it here though. So object snap tracking. This is kind of the big thing right here is the auto snap. So if I'm out here drawing and I get to right here, it's actually going to let me snap to a whole bunch of things. All right. Along with that, we have the object snap settings right here, which I can turn on. So this one works by this one right here is, see those little green squares right there? I can actually do a reference point, again, kind of like how we did in uh, in SketchUp, where you were able to kind of hover over a point, it would figure it out. So this, if I wanted to go from this point, I could just go, okay, I want to go up to that, and you can see those green reference lines. If I turn this off, those go away. So, well, some of them go away, apparently. Um, which ones do go away? Now I'm confused. Anyway. Um, what is important here is the 2D snaps right here. And so this is that menu that I was like, okay, we'll get into this in the next thing. So what's usually important is to have the endpoint, midpoint, and center. Those are going to be kind of your big things. So I might want the center of this, endpoint here, endpoint there. Those are going to be your big major spots that you're actually going to be drawing lines to. Make sure those are turned on. Oh, this is the extension right here, and that'll actually, that's the one that turns off. No? Still no? Really? Okay, I don't know what's going on then. I must have that confused with something else. So if I have, for example, the, where was it, intersection one right here turned on, if I go to draw a line, it'll actually snap to that intersection and it highlights that fact right there. So there's a couple different ones here. Generally, again, endpoint, midpoint, and center are going to be your primary ones to be working with. Next up, we will get into these other ones when we get into annotation scales. Um, just be aware that they are here. And then this one, this last one right here is the annotation scale view. Um, when we actually do get to putting this in to scale, one of the things you'll be doing is you'll be coming to the paper space here a lot, turning off that grid, and then with this little menu that now has a weird decimal number, you'll set that to be your paper scale. So quarter inch equals 1 foot. This is now quarter inch equals 1 foot on the default 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that it launched us in here with. All right. um, and yeah, that's all we're gonna want on this. Um, let's see. There was, okay. So every once in a while, people won't have this little menu that I have next to the mouse. Okay, it's F12 on the keyboard, and it also turns on and off my recording. So, there we go. So, yeah, that's that one right there. Um, and then from here, we'll, excuse me, it is kind of late. Um, we'll get into some other settings in another video, but those are kind of the core basics. And then from there, we can start getting into um, kind of building blocks. We'll create some layers, and we'll do a couple other things. All right, see you guys in class.